We're going to talk about La Collection Imperiale of Napoleon I. Now, I don't speak French, so I'm going to murder the language every opportunity I get. But we'll talk about this collection, which reflects major events in the life of Napoleon Bonaparte, also known as Napoleon I, since he did start a dynasty. This series of 24 medals is each 42 millimeters and weighs 50 grams. And we'll talk about each one of these medals in a few minutes. Now, I want to emphasize that these are replicas of the real medals. The artwork was redone, and you can see by this comparison, it was reasonable, but still some detail is lost with these replicas. They're still a handsome medal and can grace any collection. Now, it came out a couple of decades ago, but maybe the 90s, maybe some other time. Unfortunately, I can't find a bit of reference in the numismatic press. I've looked through the Newman portal, any reference that I may have laying around, but I just can't find this particular series. I know 10 years ago, this thing was touted as like the Imperial Collection on eBay and other vendors. But since then, it has just, become the individual medals. Some magazine somewhere has that information, but some sale listings do reference that these are products of the Monnaie de Paris, but there is no edge marking on them, the privy mark, nor the composition of the medals. I have all but 3 of this collection, and not a one of them has those marks. Now, these things did copy original Napoleonic material, but they are hard to attribute. The French language catalog of Napoleonic medals was released in 1904. Everybody knows about Bramson, published in Copenhagen. The first catalog listed 934 pieces, all text, no pictures. Part 2 followed in 1907 with another 841 pieces, and Part 3 was in 1913 with 555 more for a total of 2,330. Bramson writes in the preface of Part 2 that if he had known the extent of the endeavor, he would never have started. How many of us catalogers have felt the same way? I'll tell you. Now, the final result was admirable, but we know today that there's a lot more than what's listed in Bramson. These catalogs are in the A&A library, and they're online at the Hathi Trust. The common reverse of this collection is the Imperial Napoleonic seal, with the Imperial Eagle atop a lightning bolt and being crowned in laurel wreath by a winged victory. The earliest medal I found with this design is Bramson 674, and it's dated 1807. And you can see the engraver's mark, Joly, Fessett, 1807. Now for this fun stuff. Since the medals only hit major events in Napoleon's life, we'll focus on them rather than the full biography of the little corporal, which was a derisive term used by his enemies. Napoleon was an ambitious man and determined that the army was the best way to achieve his goals. He rapidly became a general during the French Revolution and was given command of the army of Italy, engaging in a series of battles against the Habsburgs of Austria, which resulted in the Treaty of Campo Formio, which gave France most of northern Italy and the Low Countries. To undermine British naval power in the Mediterranean, the army of Egypt headed south, capturing Malta and sliding into Egypt, where he again won a series of battles, including the Battle of the Pyramids. Soldiers, inside of these pyramids, we contemplate 40 centuries. Plunder was the major goal of the French army, and it was going very well until Nelson destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile. Returning to France, he effectively destroyed the last of the revolutionary directory and established a dictatorship with himself in charge. In the meantime, the Austrians were trying to reclaim northern Italy. Napoleon opposed and fought the Battle of Marengo, using risky tactics but defeating the Austrians once again. Now, the Legion of Honor was established in 1802 to encourage achievement in military and civilians alike. it is still France's highest honor. There were always plots of intrigue to diminish Napoleon's power and to assassinate him. To consolidate all power, he was crowned Emperor of the French on 2 December 1804. Two crowns were used, a golden laurel wreath harkening back to Roman times, which he wore as he entered the rooms, and a replica of Charlemagne's crown, which he held over his head instead of the Pope doing it, and then placed it on Josephine's head. This act so enraged Beethoven that he scratched out the dedication of his Third Symphony, Eroica, which he had originally dedicated to Napoleon. He established, that's our coronation in Paris up here. He established the Napoleonic Code, also known as the Civil Code, during that time frame. Note the old revolutionary calendar is used for these two medals. On 13 ran from September 1804 to September 1805. The Army of England was formed to invade across the English Channel in 1805. The first Legion of Honors were awarded at this time, and a column was erected on the shores of the Channel at Boulogne to commemorate the great victory over the British. Unfortunately for the French, that pesky Nelson kicked them all over the sea at Trafalgar, thus ending that initiative. With his hopes dashed in the west, Napoleon turns his sights to the east and assembled a massive army. He began crossing the Rhine in September, won decisive victories in Ulm, which is in Bavaria, and Vienna, and by December engaged in the Battle of Austerlitz, which is in Moravia. Here again, Napoleon used risky tactics to lure the enemy into a trap, winning a decisive victory. The Confederation of the Rhine was established after Austerlitz, comprising the conquered German states and the Austrians. Napoleon had a habit of absorbing conquered armies into his own, just like the Romans did. The Confederation effectively ended the Holy Roman Empire, which consolidated Napoleon's power and ascendancy over Europe as emperor and king. Although the Rhine had already been crossed the previous year, this medal was issued to commemorate that event. Invading Prussia with 180,000 troops, the twin battles of Jena and Austerstadt inflicted heavy casualties on the Prussians, making them incapable of continuing the fight. The French army captured 140,000 soldiers, 2,000 cannons, and tons of ammunition. Further battles further east saw more conquest, culminating in the Treaty of Tilsit, which punished the Prussians and allowed Napoleon to return to France for a respite. Now, Portugal was the next target due to trade disputes, but Napoleon was not leading the armies in the Peninsular Wars at first. Spain was gradually drawn into the conflict, and the result was Napoleon's brother Jerome as the King of Spain. The Spanish hated that idea and defeated the French, leading to Napoleon's direct involvement, which he won. But there is still a massive tie-up of troops to keep the occupation alive, which hurt his other endeavors. A direct result of this disruption was a series of independent movements in Spanish America. However, Austria was still in the game and thirsty for revenge. They invaded Bavaria in early April 1809 with a numerical superiority, surprising the French. Napoleon arrived from Paris a week later and through a brilliant plan routed the Austrian army, taking Vienna for the second time in 4 years. Attempting to cross the Danube at the villages of Essling and Aspern in May, Napoleon suffered his first major defeat, bringing hope to the Allies that he could be conquered. Regrouping his forces and hammering out an effective battle plan took several weeks, and in July, the second Danube crossing was attempted and succeeded at the Battle of Wagram, his largest battle to date. Both armies were exhausted, but an armistice was signed between the two forces in late July. His wife Josephine had not given birth to an heir, so he divorced her and married Marie Louise, daughter of Francis II, who was the last Holy Roman Emperor. The marriage also cemented the recent alliance with Austria. A son, sometimes called Napoleon II, was born, and he was given the title of King of Rome, which essentially meant nothing. Russia was the only major power standing between Napoleon and total domination of Europe. Despite the best advice of his commanders, he led 450,000 troops across the Niemen River, the Russian frontier, on 24 June 1812. The Lithuanian capital, Vilna or Vilnius, was captured immediately, and Napoleon pursued a retreating army deeper into Russia. Bad idea, it turns out. But it was not an actual retreat, but a strategic withdrawal. The Russians used a scorched earth policy, which made any French provisioning harder and harder. The Battle of Moscow, also known as the Battle of Borodino, was met on September 7th, 1812, killing about 79,000 soldiers, the bloodiest single day of battle in the history of the world up till then. The Russians retreated, Napoleon entered Moscow, but instead of surrender, the city was burned, forcing the French to try to go home. But the Russian winter hit and all but destroyed what was left of the French army, with only 40,000 crossing back into French territory. That was out of 450,000 that went. Napoleon had to leave the army in a sledge to return to Paris. A new coalition was formed against the French, and Napoleon hastened to get reinforcements, mainly in the most traveled pass between France and Italy, Mount Cenis. The medal proudly proclaims, in 3 months, France and Italy reinforced 1,200,000 men for the defense of the empire, 1813. But the number was exaggerated and the troops were poorly trained, the horses of low quality, since the first-line troops were lost during the Russian campaign. With 200,000 men, Napoleon again crossed the Rhine to quickly engage the new enemy. Visiting a 1632 battlefield near Lutzen, he heard the sounds of gunfire and quickly engaged, forming a trap and sending coalition forces into retreat. The battle was won, but casualties were so high in this and subsequent battle that an armistice was signed and basically broke his power in Germany. Political enemies in France and coalition forces on the border signaled the end of Napoleon's power. He won a series of skirmishes known as the 6 Days Campaign, but it was not enough. The invasion of France happened in the March of 1814, causing the leaders of Paris to surrender. With the mutiny of his lead general and the public against him, Napoleon was forced to abdicate in April of 1814 and was exiled to Elba, an island in the Mediterranean. He was down but not out. His wife and son went to Austria, and his promised allowance was denied. So he left Elba, landed in southern France, and rebuilt his army with his old friend, the general, who had mutinied against him in the previous year. He was again declared emperor in Paris for the period known as the 100 Days. A coalition of Prussia, Great Britain, Russia, and Austria each fielded 150,000 men, while Napoleon's army of 200,000 marched north into what is now Belgium. Leading part of the coalition at Waterloo, he was repeatedly defeated and upon withdrawal was attacked by fresh Prussian troops. Back in Paris, he realized he could not continue and abdicated again, surrendering to a British naval officer at Rochefort. This time he was really put away in St. Helena, an Atlantic island almost 2,000 miles off the coast of Africa. To plug the gap, a large garrison was stationed in Ascension Island, which is essentially between France and St. Helena. He died there on 5th of May 1821. With persistent rumors, he was poisoned. He was buried on the island. The French king got permission from the British to bring Napoleon's remains to Paris for reburial. The state funeral was held on 15 December 1840, with procession attended by thousands down the Champs-Élysées to Les Invalides, where he lays today in a specially built stone sarcophagus. And I believe this was the cemetery at St. Helena, with the little fence around it, because L'Anvelad's a huge building, the tomb and everything is just monstrous. Anyway, so ends the story of Napoleon Bonaparte as told by this nice set of medals. They're readily available on eBay for the most part and other outlets. In fact, you can find sets of them outside eBay if you look hard enough. The thing to remember is these are not original Napoleonic medals. They are merely replicas of the real thing. But that doesn't stop vendors, intentionally or not, from charging prices consistent with contemporary material. The good price range is $20 to $40, although I did get a half set for about $5 a piece. Now, this reference section is rather sparse, as my major source is the Wikipedia article. More has been written about Napoleon than any other historical person except Jesus Christ, and I highly recommend getting a good biography to learn more about this fascinating man.